Hi, Bill Donovan. This is a Medfield wastewater treatment plant. It was built around 1974, went into operation in 1975. It's capable of 1.52 million gallons a day treat waste. And we can take you if you'd like, and we'll show you where the sewage comes into the plant and then where we pump it up into the system to be treated.
Okay, this is the, where I told you where the sludge, not the sludge yet, it's not, the waste comes into the building. If you look down here, this is the lowest point in Medfield. Everything comes down the pipes through the town to this point down here on the other side of that wall. It's a wet well and a screen. We screen out solids that we don't want to go through the system. And then the waste gets down into the wet well, like I said, these pumps. The pumps pump it up into an aerated grit chamber, which is right outside. And we can go show you where that comes up there. These pumps here that you're looking at are primary pumps. In the part of the process when we remove the sludge, the primary sludge, we use these pumps to do it. It pumps out of the tank, primary tank, and then we'll pump into holding tanks we have in the building.
Off to the left up here is where we have our two main chemicals that we are adding on a daily basis. So the tank to the left, that is for our PAC or poly aluminum chloride, and the tank to the right, as labeled, is sodium aluminate.
We also have the capability, we take septage from Medfield only. A lot of houses still have septic tanks, and not everybody's hooked up to the sewer system. So when they have their septic tank serviced and pumped, the trucks will come down here, usually 1,000 to 2,000 gallons, depending on the size of the system, and it will be dumped down here, and the trucks will pull to this platform here, back up, and there's a hole in the ground, and they'll pump it off of the truck into the aerated grid chamber. This is the same chamber that I just showed you where the pumps pump the raw sewage pumps pump the sewage up into these aerated grid chambers. The grid chambers are add air, as you can see, and what we want is we want any sand or suspended solids to drop out in the grid chamber. So this is pretty much the beginning of the treatment process. There's two aerated grid chambers here. The sewage goes from the aerated grid chambers to the primary sedimentation tanks, which is the next phase. Anything that rises to the top in the primary sedimentation tank comes down to the end here, and you can see where this baffle is. We'll turn that and we'll scoop any grease or anything that's floating on the surface and get rid of it into these tanks, which when they fill up, we'll pump into the main tank in the treatment plant, and then we'll get rid of it. And you can see the flights are moving very slowly, drawing this grease and whatever else is floating down to this area of the tank, where we'll turn this and we can scoop any grease and particulate matter into the holding tank. On the other side here is where the tank continues. You can see the water going over the weirs here. And then it goes into the aeration tanks I told you about. Here, the plant splits. So this flow comes in here and goes, some of it goes straight, some of it goes off to the left to that other bank of aeration. This is one of two secondary clarifiers that we have, and it's a sludge blanket. So that tells us how much sludge is in the tank, basically, that and some other tests we do. But for a quick, to see what you've got for a blanket in there, we'll stick it. Sean will show you, it's called the sludge judge. And it's basically to tell us how high the blanket is. What we want to do is we don't want the blanket to get too high, because then it would come up and go over. You can notice that the water is a lot cleaner going over the side here. That's because the sludge, the secondary sludge, has separated out to the bottom of the tank. The water is on top, the clean water. So that's what's coming over the weirs. You can see the sludge judge, how at the bottom 3 feet or so is like that dark chocolatey color. that tells us there's probably about 2 feet or so of sludge in this tank right now. That will go up through the day as the flow increases, that will come up higher. So we have to, when it gets up too high, we'll remove it from the system, which we call wasting secondary sludge. So we'll remove it with some other big plunger pumps and bring it into the main building where we have 2 10,000-gallon holding tanks that stores the sludge until we can truck it out. The sand filter is like a big, some people have pools and they have a sand filter. This is just a lot bigger. This sand filter will handle 6 million gallons of flow.
The sand filter and a lot of other components here consume a lot of energy. The sand filter, in order to run those pumps, the sand needs to be clean. The UV system has 24 bulbs. It ensures that the bacteria are killed so they don't reproduce out there. We can't test that in-house, but just to make sure that it's legit and certified and everything, all of our stuff goes out to a lab. So in addition to the E. coli, they're also testing for BOD and TSS, which is biological oxygen demand. So obviously we want to make sure that the water's clear, that it's going out like it is right now. And like Bill had mentioned, that it has a proper oxygen level, so all the wildlife that's out in the river isn't affected negatively. For the UV system, we test, the permit just changed in April, but we still test during April 1st to November 30th for the fecal bacteria in there. And it's not what's present, but it's just their ability to reproduce. So if we are discharging any, they're killed, made sterile, so they're not able to explode their population out in the river where people are swimming, kayaking, etc. So just making sure that the water out there is sterile, safe for people to be in. So we send out to a certified lab once a week for that. We'll give you a sneak peek of the birds that are underneath here. It's not affecting the wildlife at all, almost as if we have no impact or that the place doesn't exist.
This is the main channel. The other side of this final tank, when we need to clean the main channel, we'll drain it down and put the flow temporarily over to the other side here to clean it out. But where it goes from the steps, you can see that pipe going out. That pipe goes out to the Charles River.
So this final tank is where the composite sampler is pulling from. So there's the tube that comes out of the shed over here and goes down and hangs in the water there. And so as part of our permit, some of the samples need to be composite, some of them need to be grab samples.
These holding tanks where we pump the primary sludge and secondary sludge, underneath our feet here, there are 2 10,000-gallon holding tanks. Once the tanks get full, like I said, we have an outside company come in and we'll pump it with these pumps here up into a tractor-trailer truck. And usually we get 5 to 6 a week of 9,000 gallons at a shot. There's a mixing tank where the sludge comes in, and then you see it cascades out of that tank to the belt itself to your right. When the sludge gets on the belt, the water falls out by gravity, and you can see when you get to the lower level here underneath, all the water coming out. The sludge dries out up top, goes down to the end, and then drops into those holding tanks. These are the bulbs for the UV system. So there's 24 of these out in the UV system like I was showing you. And they're in the system like this and the water goes by it. The light bulb here naturally is right here, and you can see it's a little burnt here. This one's been used, but it's still good. And that's what gives off the UV, the ultraviolet light. So we have to do maintenance on them or replace them if the light bulb goes out. Still use some of these alarms. If we get an alarm, one of these lights will go off and flash and notify us. This right here is the flow coming into the treatment plant right now. It's about 700,000 gallons. So in a 24-hour period. So if you break it down, 700,000 divided by 24 hours, that'll give us our flow, which it's about 480 gallons a minute right now coming into the treatment plant.
So as we were mentioning before, We run a lot of different tests to just kind of keep an idea of how the process is doing. So one of the things that we use is the settleometer right here. And so you'd grab a liter of the sludge from the aeration tank, and then you would pour that into there, and then you time 5, 30, 60 minutes, and then you record how it's settling out on there. So you want to have it where it's almost like Goldilocks, where you're not doing too fast or too slow. So if you put it in here, usually the rule is by half an hour, you want to be somewhere around 300 to 400.
Also, we have 9 pump stations around town. These are the different pump stations in the area. Thomas Clues, this one happens to be down at the highway garage. So we can tell what the level is in the pump station right now. If either one of the pumps are running, which they're not, they're red. The green and red, this is number 2 pump and the number 1 pump.
So what happens is that paper will let down to its design size a certain amount of the water to go through, and then the solids will be collected on the filter. And then what happens is you dry it, and you take the weight before you put the sample on there, and then you take the weight afterwards, making sure you remove all the moisture, the water off of it by putting it into the oven and the desiccator. And the difference in the weight, when you do the equation out, will tell you what you have for how many solids per volume that you collected.
We have the influent pumps, which are the pumps that when it comes into the treatment plant, this screen is for that. You can see the flow was very low, but then when everybody got up this morning and started doing their showers and stuff, the flow went up. So right about now, 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock is our peak flow for the day.
When we send out, we have different kinds of bottles that we'll collect into. For example, E. coli. They go out on these, sealed on the top, and so to make sure that they're sterile. They're trying to see if bacteria will regrow on it. You have a window of like 24 hours. So we try to sample it as close to when the courier comes from the lab.
What they're upgrading right now around town, we have infiltration INI meters that will tell us what area, like this particular area is West Mill Street. We can tell right now West Mill Street and the 25-inch sewer pipe is 52 gallons a minute right now coming down that pipe. We can look in our microscope, and we do that daily usually, to see what kind of bugs we have. Different, rotifers, there's stalk cellulite, free-swimming cellulite, amoeba, all these different bacteria. If you see them, it'll tell you whether there's a healthy sludge or you need a little more air, or you need to put something in to help them survive and thrive.
We have this nice machine. What it helps us do is to be able to test for the ammonia. One of the cool other tests that we do too is quarterly we'll send out for toxicity. It's called wet testing, and they actually will test it with live fish and just make sure that the fish are able to reproduce and live and thrive and everything in the different concentrations, or the 100% concentration of the effluent coming out of this plant. So it's just really making sure that what we're sending out is good for the environment. But yeah, that's pretty much about it.